Hey, how's everybody doing today? We are doing an exclusive, that's right, an exclusive show right here on our Facebook group, Head to Head SW, um, the community. And as you guys can see, we have a special guest with us today. That's right, we got one of our longtime viewers and longtime friends, Dave Cossey. How you doing, Dave?
Hey, good, Eric. How are you?
Great. And of course, we got Daryl. Hey, Daryl.
What's going on?
All right, and we are going to talk about this George Lucas sequel trilogy that could have been, and we're going to do it right after this.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And
I'm Dave Cossey.
All right. And yes, we are here. We are live. And we are actually hoping that we could do this more often, both on the Facebook group. And of course, we're going to be uploading this in a day or two to YouTube. So all of our YouTube friends can watch this show too. And then, of course, Dave, we're hoping that we can get you actually on the show, like the real Friday live stream.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So as you guys know, and this is kind of cool because Dave actually doesn't know anything about this, right? You just only know pretty much the title that we came up with.
The headline.
That was great. We brought Dave on a show where he doesn't know anything about what we're talking about.
It's like a blind date.
I know. Well, I mean, sometimes you have to do it. What can you say? I mean, what can I say? But so Daryl, you're the one that kind of came up with this whole thing. So why don't you kick us off?
I didn't. You did. You came up with this. No, I'm just joking. So
don't on me.
So pretty much what we're talking about today is the George Lucas sequel trilogy idea. So as I was kind of poking around the internet, this kind of popped up. And I was like, whoa, okay, let me see what his actual plans were for the actual sequel. And this isn't something that was like kind of just an offhanded remark or, some random interview. Like he actually sat down, with someone. It's actually in a book. And he actually revealed kind of what his plans were for the sequel trilogy had he actually done it. Now, of course, the initial question is, why didn't he do it? He decided he had a baby, he had a daughter, and he really actually wanted to spend time and, raising and being a good dad and whatnot. So he says, doing a trilogy takes about 10 years to do. So for him, he was just like, that's just 10 years of my kid's life that I'm not going to, be able to get back. So let me just, just be a good dad. And, he pretty much sold off the franchise. So
I guess let's be a really good dad. And I'm just going to.
Well, yeah, that trust fund is looking really nice for her when she gets older. So, but pretty much the whole gist of the of his version of the sequel trilogy is pretty cool. Basically, it features Darth Maul as the main villain. Now, of course, those of us who watch Rebels were like, well, how's that going to happen considering that he died in Rebels? But I think this has happened. I think he had these ideas before Rebels actually happened. So the thing is that Darth Maul was pretty much, it's going to actually focus on Luke and Leia, of course, but it was going to focus on Luke starting the Jedi Academy or rebuilding the Jedi Academy. Leia was actually going to start off, rebuilding the New Republic, and it was actually going to focus heavily on Leia because it was actually going to show why she was the chosen one. And in a way, she still ends up being the chosen one because she's the one who brings order and balance back to the galaxy by creating the New Republic. See how that works? So that was cool. Now, Darth Maul takes on he took on an apprentice, a female Sith Lord named Darth Talon, and she kind of becomes like
cool name.
Yeah, I love the name. And she pretty much is like the main villain, but because and Maul is resurrected, with the spider legs and things like we saw in the Clone Wars, and he's pretty much the godfather of the crime world. He's kind of running this whole crime industry that we saw in Solo at the end of Solo, Crimson Dawn. And so so he's pretty much like running that whole thing, and Darth Talon is pretty much like his apprentice, his Darth Vader, pretty much to the Emperor. He's basically the new Emperor because the Empire has fallen. So That's pretty much like the whole gist of it. And a lot of people are kind of like, oh, okay, well, that would have been kind of cool to see. And then we actually could have found out some of the things of how Palpatine was able to actually come back in the Rise of Skywalker later on. But this is actually something that a lot of fans really are kind of clamoring for. And there's actually some talk that this might actually happen, because you can still tell this story because it happens in a space between, and you still have, it doesn't convolute or distract from the canon of Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker.
Well, the thing, how long after? So, I mean, obviously, this is taking place after Return of the Jedi because it is his version of the sequel trilogy. So, how far
into that timeline? I'm thinking he's probably thinking maybe 5 to 10 years, and they already pretty much had, like, you know, they feel, a lot of people feel like they still can do this, and a lot of people want it done because you still have Alden Ehrenreich who can still kind of play Han Solo. You already still have Donald Glover who can still play Lando, and then even Mark Hamill gave his blessing on Sebastian Shaw playing himself. So you just need, and then you also have the young lady who played Leia at the end of Rogue One. So you could actually pull this off, and it doesn't interfere with Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, and of course the first of the sequel, The Force Awakens.
So basically what you're saying is that overall in a sequel trilogy, somebody's going to be resurrected, right?
Yeah, I mean, Maul is going to be, it was going to be resurrected. Now, how that will work now, of course,
well, you can't have Star Wars without a resurrection, right? I mean, somebody has to come back from the dead, no matter what. It's Star Wars.
Right. So now, of course, we can't have Maul. Like, if they were to do this now, of course, we can't bring back Maul. However, you still could. You could alter the story, huh?
Why? Think about it. He was cut in half and fell down a shaft in the Phantom Menace, and they were able to bring him back.
Brought it back.
Yeah. However, his explanation for it, it's stretching a bit, but you could kind of understand it. However, after seeing him die at the hands of Obi-Wan in Rebels, I mean, that's just got to be it. Because if that were the case, he would still be able to fight and still be angry, but he wasn't talking. He wasn't, you know, in agony or anything. He was just gone. So, however, you still could introduce Darth Talon, because she could just have her as like, okay, you know, she kind of waited in the wings because this was my master's plan. And then now that the Empire has fallen, she can now ascend to that place.
Well, the other thing you could do too is you can also bring, you know, any of the enemies that are villains or whatever that they brought up in like the new canon books too.
Right.
Have them be kind of the main. I'm trying to remember who the guy was. I brought this up not last week, because we didn't actually have the show last week, but like a week ago or something. Oh, who was it? It was in the book A New Dawn. And it was like the guy was kind of cool. He ended up dying in that, of course. So that actually probably rules him out. But I mean, there's like plenty of
resurrect him. I mean,
there you go. Exactly. You got to resurrect somebody because it's Star Wars. But I mean, there was somebody that they could actually bring out, because I mean, there's a lot of really cool villains in the books. I mean, you could even do a Thrawn thing if you wanted to, and kind of make it a little like the expanded universe.
True.
You bring Thrawn back, you've got to bring Ezra back, right?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to, but I mean, you could.
You could. Well, it also depends on
unless
what you're
Thrawn
doing.
killed him or something. I mean, you could always have that. But if you wanted to, I see what you're going though. If you want to introduce him in live action, you could do that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I just think you have to try to figure. Well, first of all, here's the other big question that I had the whole time that I was reading this stuff. Right. You know, I'm reading through the sequel trilogy, and I'm like, man, I really wish they had actually made this version. Because remember, when we did the whole Colin Trevorrow, this is what episode 9 would have been, the whole Duel of the Fates thing.
Right.
And I was really super excited about that. It was kind of the same thing. When I read this whole George Lucas thing, I'm like, man, this thing is really good. I mean, this is a really good story. But here's my question. And both of you guys, you know, I don't know. What do you think about this? Where, you remember back when they originally revealed what Lucas was going to do with his whole little nano creatures and they were going to get in the force and all that? It's like, well, wait, what happened to that though?
Right. That was a question that I had too.
Well, that could have been. I mean, that could have been a draft, though. You know, that could have.
It could have been later, like because this.
Yeah, we don't know exactly when he wrote it, right?
Exactly. I think. Well, you said that, and I remember it came out. I forgot what book it was, an encyclopedia or something or whatever.
It's like the Star Wars Archives, 1999 to 2005. I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, that's what it was. So I mean, he could have been bound. I think he was actually entertaining this stuff like not too long after Revenge of the Sith came out.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about the Rogue Stormtroopers have started their own planets. That was another part about it too.
Oh yeah. Well, it seems like there was a little bit of an element of what they ended up doing in The Mandalorian. You know, where they have like different factions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which would have been really, really cool, I think. You know, because that's one of the things that I really like about. Because it's funny, a lot of people love The Mandalorian now because it kind of goes back to the whole Star Wars. I mean, you basically have different people fall into one of a few camps when it comes to The Mandalorian. I think you can almost compare this to what people would feel like if the sequel trilogy thing happened. And that is, you have some people that love The Mandalorian because it feels like Star Wars. It's, you know, it's kind of fun. It's action packed and all this other stuff. Then you have other people that love it, like some of the casual fans, because it's basically like a Western in the Star Wars universe. And that was one of the things that attracted me to it, was the fact that finally they were starting to do like genre movies, but in the Star Wars universe. That was sort of my thing. And I ended up really like it because one of the things about it too is it's a very episodic TV series. And this is something that I think a lot of people miss the point on. I mean, not to venture too much into The Mandalorian now, because I know we're dealing with this sequel trilogy thing, but it does kind of relate because, you know, you had this episodic series, and I think people thought that it was going to be kind of like how the Clone Wars and Rebels and all that, where it's like this huge story arc. And I mean, you have that. You obviously have that.
Yeah.
But you have to take The Mandalorian as a one episode, this is the adventure of the week kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that was with Lucas's trilogy, what he was trying to do was he was taking the main characters, I think, and actually bringing them back to what people would have expected out of them.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing because, you know, as a fan and, you know, Dave, I want your input on this. Were you disappointed at the...
We're going to spend this whole episode just grilling Dave about these different things. So, Dave.
Yeah. Dave,
how
where were you
feel about, you know?
Yeah, where were you the night of? But
what we should do is get a Star Wars hater on the show and just like totally just grill him and roast him. What do you mean exactly that you don't?
No, so Dave, like, how did you feel about the use of Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I was my jaw dropped when he threw the lightsaber behind him at the end of Force Awakens. My jaw dropped. I, you know, after man, that's a loaded question.
You know what's funny about that, though?
It is like that for most Star Wars fans.
I mean, you're bringing that up, but Daryl, and you probably remember because we saw it together. There was literally a collective gasp in the movie theater when that happened.
Yeah,
he chucked the lightsaber,
and everybody's like, you know, and it was just like, wow. I mean, everybody, I think, was mind blown because, and if you think about it, what was it, like 2 years between movies or something? Or no, it was one
year.
Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking old Star Wars here when it was like 3. But yeah, it was like, so, you know, they had this big climax in The Force Awakens and, you know, Rey's like handing him the lightsaber or whatever.
First of all, you see the Luke turn around and you're just like,
you know,
oh, it's Luke.
Like, oh, it's Luke. And, you know, there's this whole thing and she's handing him the lightsaber and he's just kind of looking at it. And then, of course, the credits come up. So you spend a whole year and everybody's speculating about what's going to happen and all that. And for that to happen.
Right. Yeah. You know, in The Last Jedi, I didn't expect the treatment of him in that way. So I didn't expect him to be so disillusioned with everything. I didn't expect him to, to cut himself off like he did, because I was a big fan of the expanded universe books. So where he became that ultra powerful Jedi, he could do a lot of stuff, and there were actually some good callbacks. I do appreciate some of the little things that they put into some of the sequel trilogy that were things that Luke was able to do, but they gave it to other characters to do. But yeah, I was not expecting that. But then it kind of left me scratching my head for a couple of weeks after I saw The Last Jedi, and eventually I came around and saw it from a certain point of view, a different point of view. and it was like, okay, so that's kind of like the way that some people go through life as well. When they're younger, they're idealistic, and then something happens to them, they become jaded, and then they cut themselves off from whatever that they were idealistic about. And that kind of, that kind of resonated with me a little bit in that situation. And I was like, okay, I can see that. I don't hate the movie, so, and then, The Rise of Skywalker was just action packed. It was, out of the three, that one was probably my favorite of the three sequels, to be perfectly honest, even though there were some weird things that happened, but, I liked how they kind of wrapped that part of the story up right there.
Okay.
But hearing about this other version, I'm kind of intrigued. I think I would like to see that.
Yeah, and you made up a really good point, because you start off at a certain point in your life where you're idealistic and you're just like, oh, I could take on a whole empire myself, so to speak.
Right.
And then, you get to a point where you get older and you're more wisdom under your belt, and you're just kind of like, and I liken it because, all three of us at some point of our lives have been teachers. And as you notice, like, a lot of teachers, when they first come out of college, they're like, oh, I'm going to change the world. I want my kids to just love me and blah, blah, blah. And then you get like 10 years in a teaching game. You're just like, look, just do your work and go home. And you get to that point where it's not that you don't care, but it's just like that. And sometimes you do feel defeated at times. I can say that too. It's like you feel like you're not reaching anybody, or you may have failed in some way, some shape or form. And Luke, being a teacher, he was always kind of like looking at Yoda and Obi-Wan. It's like, okay, well, these guys were great, and I don't feel like I have achieved what they achieved, yet I'm supposed to be this powerful Jedi. I'm supposed to come from this lineage of amazing people, and I don't feel like I'm this person. And so I can really, I definitely understand, what you're saying, Dave, as far as how that could resonate with people. Although a lot of people didn't want to see Luke go that way. They want, and I like the fact that he brought that up. He addressed it like, what did you want me to do? Stand there with a laser sword and stand down the whole, stand down the whole First Order. Yeah, no, it's just like, everybody was in the theater like,
by the way, that was Ryan Johnson talking to us.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
That was basically him. Like, he knew he was going to get a bunch of crap for this. So that was him basically like going, listen, now Luke's going to tell you.
And the fact that he just called it a laser sword was just so dismissive, especially after he chucked it. And then it's like, all right, it's not a laser sword. It's, but what about Leia though? How did you feel about Leia?
Well, I liked that she, ended up becoming the mentor to Rey. I think that was needed at that time. Unfortunate circumstances in the non-cinematic world were such that we didn't get more Leia, which, I think she would have been more pivotal even in The Rise of Skywalker had Carrie Fisher lived and been able to film that movie. So Yeah, I I wanted to see more. I wanted to see more of her powers, more of her training, more of what makes her a Jedi,
Yeah.
But yeah, limitations as what they were. They did good with what they had.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Were you at all surprised at how powerful she was? Because up until this point, like the most we've seen from Leia was she was able to like hear Luke when he spoke to her through the Force. We've never seen any Force abilities, but then now, our first glimpse of it was she did the whole Mary Poppins things in the middle of space, and everybody's just like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the Rise of Skywalker kind of explains some of that. Like they showed her training with Luke, and her power was for the bulk of her life, or the bulk of her young life was really unrealized. She probably was doing some things within the Force that people couldn't, or she didn't even know that she was doing. Which that could be why she was a great senator at that point of A New Hope, and or why people regarded her as such, and why she ended up being so revered later. But then getting into her training, she just kind of like exploded with power, kind of like Rey did. So that it made sense to kind of show that, and it also made sense that that Leia was like Rey's main mentor at that time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was one of the things that really excited me about the whole thing was, first of all, what they ended up doing with Leia I thought was great, but it really makes you think, because I mean, they basically gave a bunch of interviews on what the plan was for her had she not unfortunately passed. Man.
Yeah.
I mean, we would have gotten some really cool stuff.
So now, one of the things that a lot of people didn't really or may not have realized was that actually Leia was Yoda's choice to be the one to bring balance into the galaxy. So I think the fact that with her being able to, with Leia being able to kind of showcase that even just a little bit in The Last Jedi, and then of course we got to see, some of that in The Rise of Skywalker. Do you think that she would have been more powerful than Luke?
That's a good question. I'm not sure she would have been more powerful than Luke, just because Luke had more time to train and to be with his his abilities and be able to hone them. It does make sense though to me that Yoda would have chosen Leia to be the chosen one, because she had a life where she had to be reserved, because she was in the public eye a lot. She had to be reserved, so she had her emotions in check. She was less reckless. And so Luke, he's a farm boy, he
right
go off on a whim to Tashi Station to try to get some power converters, and not give a rip about Uncle Owen back there busting his hump, trying to
trying to make a life out here for you.
Yeah, right. So but yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I think that it makes sense. That's
great observation. Great observation. I think you hit a lot of valid points on that, because if you're in her eyes, she's had to hone a lot of the things that, and I think Yoda knew that, even going, because he knew that she was going to Alderaan with Bail, and Bail was going to raise her, and so especially after a certain period of time, I'm sure there's been chatter and things he probably felt or heard and saw that, like, okay, Leia's developing into like a bureaucrat, so to speak. So a lot of that has to deal with being patient, having to, and that was one of the things that that concerned Yoda the most with Luke was that he had no patience. And, Obi-Wan was like, he would learn patience. So, it's kind of like, yeah, you kind of see why Leia would have been the ideal person to go up against. And especially, too, in thinking about it, maybe Yoda may have thought about this. If she resembled anything like Padme, he knew about Anakin's love for Padme, I don't think Vader could have really fought that as well as he would have been able to fight Luke. Because Luke, he would see himself. But then if he saw Leia, he would see Padme. And that's always been Anakin's.
Well, I mean, if he knew that was her daughter, then yeah, but.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. If she started moving up in the ranks and he already knew who Leia was. And that's another thing that, kind of trips me out, though, is that how did Vader not?
Yeah, I know that's a big one. It's
like how do you not
he was dealing with her in the Death Star at that one time?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, Darth Vader, only you could be so bold.
Yeah.
It's like, she's all yapping at her dad, but it's kind of like,
that sounds like something my wife would say.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like she doesn't bear any resemblance to your, I don't know, dead wife. That wouldn't concern you at all. Like, I don't know. I mean, but I guess because he believed, Palpatine, but then even he realized Palpatine lied to him so many times. So it's like this could be a possibility.
It just makes me wonder, though, if like Palpatine actually blocked, that knowledge in a way, clouding his mind or something.
But did Palpatine even know? Did Palpatine even know?
That's a good question.
But then even because Eric, you've read you've been up on the Darth Vader comics a lot. So I remember you were talking about like he was going back to was in Naboo, and he actually was like he found the handmaidens and all that type of stuff. And so like
yeah. And I mean there was a lot that Palpatine actually did know, but he was keeping from Vader and things like that because I mean he lied, he knew. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting though because I'm trying to think back to all the comics and some of the novels and stuff. Like, was there any one where you definitively saw that was the case? Because you also have a situation like there's a scene in one of the recent Darth Vader comics where it actually Vader's having a vision and it shows like Palpatine creating him in Shmi's womb, but the guy that wrote the comic and then the guy, one of the story group guys were like, no, that's just like a vision and you can't really trust the dark side and all that. And it's not, a lot of fans were actually taking that as, that's it. They finally admitted that this is what happened. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about this whole George Lucas sequel trilogy was he was actually planning on that as part of the storyline. So it's kind of like now that, and this is one of the reasons why I think that fans are somewhat clamoring for this thing to come out because, as people are seeing that, hey, these fan theories that the Disney folks are basically, or Lucasfilm, I should say, under Disney is dismissing. I mean, this is kind of like the creators' plan the whole time, So,
right.
I mean, it just sort of jibes with the whole thing, I think. And it actually, I mean, honestly, it makes sense. We all know that Plagueis was experimenting with creating life through the Force, and it would make sense that Palpatine would, latch onto that. And
sure,
I mean, instead of getting your apprentice, why not create one?
Yeah, that way you know what you're getting. Yeah.
The only problem I have with that, though, to go on the other side of this, is that you're leaving an awful lot to chance. I mean, if you really go back and see the way that Anakin ended up, I mean, granted, yeah, maybe you could say, oh, Palpatine crashed their ship on Tatooine so they would happen to find him, but I don't know.
I mean, I just think, yeah, I mean, honestly, I think what happened was he probably, I mean, let's just say, for speculation's sake, he did create, Vader in Shmi's womb. Okay. And he probably meant to like, okay, go back or periodic because that's his homeworld anyway. Mm-hmm. Well, Tatooine is his home. I mean, Naboo is his homeworld. But, I can see him going over to Tatooine just to, check on things, so to speak, and see how she's doing or, okay, where this kid is, And I feel like, as he's probably getting older, he'll probably grow in the Force, which Palpatine would probably sense and then go after him.
Right.
Because unlike Jedi, Sith don't need you to, be an infant or a child for them to get you to start training. Sith will grab you whenever. So I feel like he probably felt like, okay, well, once Anakin gets old enough, I'll go seek him out. I'll use the Force and go seek him out. And then I'll just start turning him if he already isn't, going down that path anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what happened was just like the will of the Force ironically just happened to guide Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to Anakin first. And then when he came across them, he was just like, okay, get you a little bit early. All right, cool.
Yeah, we'll watch your career with great interest.
Yeah, exactly. So now I was like, all right, well, I don't have to wait till he's, now the Force kind of brought him to me. That's what probably Palpatine is thinking, but so are the Jedi as well.
Well, you know what the other intriguing thing about this whole Lucas sequel trilogy thing was to me? It wasn't just that Darth Maul would be the ultimate bad guy, but that they were going to, and it's really interesting because we get this in Solo, but Lucas's original plan was to have Maul rise up through the ranks of organized crime and be the head of Crimson Dawn. And what's cool about that is that it would have been a little bit different, where Palpatine was more rising up through the legitimate political system in order to gain, ultimate power, basically. Maul was approaching it a little bit differently. He was going through the organized crime route. And I think that might have actually spawned some interesting stories in that one.
Well, yeah, the criminal element is always going to be really interesting because now you're dealing with all kinds of people. You got just smugglers and bounty hunters, all those types of people. I mean, just look at what those that group that Ahsoka and those girls had.
Oh yeah,
they had those weird heads. But yeah, like those guys, the Pikes.
Oh,
yeah, the Pike gang. Yeah, like those guys are pretty powerful. I mean, like, when you mention certain factions like the Pikes, the Hutts, like those are organized crime, and you just like you don't screw with those guys, so
Contra Club, which sounds like an 80s new wave band to me, but but so they fit in Star Wars canon.
Hey, Star Wars was released in the 80s too, so hey, could have been. So actually be the cool band name, The Empire. But anyway, I just think that when you start looking at the different stories that are kind of out there, I think this sequel trilogy, I would love to see it. I mean, honestly, like if they, of course we would love to see Maul. Now, of course, we can't see him because he's dead. So unless they, bring holocrons or, recordings or something like that, she might have had of her master. But this Darth Talon chick, what I'm saying? Like, okay, if you're going to be going up against Luke Skywalker, you better be pretty powerful. I think that will actually get people excited because now they'll get the Luke Skywalker they wanted that they missed out on in The Last Jedi. So that way they can accept The Last Jedi's version a little bit better now that they got kind of what they wanted.
I'd like to see Luke and Leia fighting side by side, lightsabers and all.
Oh yeah.
They'd be a force to be reckoned with.
Oh man. I mean, I think those two, I don't think anybody could take them out if that's the case. I mean, you probably need like a Kylo Ren and a Vader or something crazy like that, or like a Snoke.
Well, that's my only slight issue with having, Maul and his Talon woman or whatever actually be, because Maul being the ultimate bad guy, I just don't. I mean, it's a cool concept and the way that we're going to do it, but he doesn't have that Snoke Palpatine kind of weight to him, though.
He's been beaten how many times already?
Right.
Maybe that's what it
That'd
is.
be like Obi-Wan being the Grand Master of the Jedi Council or something. It's a great meme that's going around right now. Did I send it to you, Daryl?
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
Sith Lords are our speciality.
Our speciality. And then it's like 5 minutes later, he's like on the ground, like knocked out, and I mean, that's basically it. Like every time he went up against somebody like really super powerful, he was like done.
Dispatched.
Yeah,
in like minutes.
20 seconds, Well,
Well, yeah, I think. See, the cool thing about Maul, I think Maul got smarter as he got older, because before he was just used as a weapon, so he didn't really, and Palpatine had such a tight rein on everything that, he will only let Maul get so far.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, as we saw progressively through the Clone Wars, when he, of course, met up with Savage, and even when you see season 7 of the Clone Wars, and as he's starting to realize his master's plan, it's like, oh, like he's putting the pieces together. So he's not stupid. It's just that he was kept in the dark from stuff for so long that he really didn't understand what the chess moves were. But then once he started, like, as he kept going along, as he started running things on his own and started setting up, like, okay. And it was, I mean, some of the stuff that he was coming up was pretty brilliant. Like how he got, what's they called? The watch group, to kind of like how he manipulated them, and, just kind of started, even how he manipulated Ezra and, Kanan and all those guys, like just how he was playing the long game, which he learned from Palpatine, and I think that given enough time, he wouldn't have been a match like Palpatine, surely, but I think he could have been at least on the levels of Snoke.
He definitely learned to be more cunning as time went on.
Definitely. And yeah. I think that's what it would be. And I think as long as he has someone with enough rage to fuel him, and of course his craving for power, and see, now he's in that space where he's like, okay, the Empire is gone, my master is gone, now and Vader's gone. The only two people he felt that can really truly stop him, he felt like, okay, well, I can just ascend now because there's no one really in my way. And it makes sense.
Yeah, but you also bring up a really good point too, when you were talking about how he was killed off in Rebels. And obviously this would be the sequel trilogy idea that Lucas had in mind that comes after Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. So we know that this was happening before Lucas was like, I mean, before the whole Clone Wars. Because remember, Lucas was the main guy behind the Clone Wars. I mean, other than like season 7 when Filoni fully took over, but pretty much up until then, like 1 through 5, that was all Lucas. So the whole mechanical, I mean, basically what he did was he just took a lot of the ideas that he was going to do in the sequel trilogy and put it in the Clone Wars.
Right.
But what makes me wonder though, is even at the time that he did it, so maybe, well, then again, I don't know, because he had, didn't he say something like he had like 100 episodes of the stupid thing like written before he even started producing it?
Something like that.
Yeah. Which, there's like 22, 23 episodes in a Clone Wars season, generally speaking. Yeah. So, that'd be like the first 5 seasons. So it really makes me wonder then where he was going to actually do all this, because obviously Maul was still alive at the end of the Clone Wars because he comes back in Rebels. Mm-hmm. So what would have been interesting to me is to see what would have happened then. What was Maul then doing during the time of the original trilogy? Because this is what it always comes down to. I mean, anytime you bring up like a pre-original trilogy character, and they're surviving, like Ahsoka, it's the same thing. Well, what were they doing during the original trilogy?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think we're going to find that out next week. Well, actually, this week.
Yeah, it might not be this week. They're good at hinting at stuff in The Mandalorian, but then they don't address it for another couple of episodes.
So speaking of The Mandalorian, I think my money is on the episode after, because it's episode 5 that Dave Filoni directs, and there's no way in the world that he's going to leave Ahsoka in the hands of
someone else.
Yeah, somebody else. So he's going to be the one when Ahsoka comes to live action. He's the one, and as far as I know, I'm pretty sure that the 5th episode is the only one that he's directing this season. Mm. So,
well, we gotta, and not to make this the Mandalorian review, we gotta say some juice, but Sasha Banks' character though, like that may be who he runs into this episode.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because when you look at again, anybody that's either watching now or anybody that watches this when we put it on YouTube, it's like when we cover the whole Mandalorian review, because we're going to have to now review the second and third episode, right? Because we're a little bit behind on that. But, or no, we did do the second one, didn't we? Yeah, we just didn't review the third. So it's the third and the fourth. I have to think because we're doing it this Friday. So the fourth episode will be out. So we'll be reviewing episodes 3 and 4, which would be like what, chapters 12 and 13. But basically, it really makes me wonder where they're going to go now for this episode, because it's kind of like we're saying, it seems like, okay, Ahsoka, okay, I'm going to go right to her now. But obviously something's got to get in the way.
And they're actually, talking about that that it could happen that we get maybe at the end of Mandalorian, Luke or Leia may pop up.
Now, when you say the end of Mandalorian, are you talking about the end of the season, or are you talking about the series? Okay, the season.
This season.
Well, and then has anybody heard anything about this Boba Fett miniseries that's supposed to be coming out?
Yeah. I was gonna, that's
yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
Oh, here we go. I hit a nerve.
Let me get my Joe Biden. Here's the deal. I just feel like you got too much of the same thing at the same time. Like, we have a Mandalorian show, then now you're gonna do another Boba Fett like thing, and they're kind of almost like the same character in a way.
Well, yeah, and in fact, when season 1 hit, well, first of all, when everybody found out that they were going to have a series called The Mandalorian, they thought it was
Boba Fett.
Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we found out it wasn't, it's kind of like, oh, it's going to be a Boba Fett stand-in. So it's like a surrogate, like a proxy or something. And I think that turned off some people but really when you watch the show though, especially, as you get into the whole season, you could see that there's some very, very big differences, and that this is a real character. This is not just like, okay, we're going to have a Boba Fett-like guy.
Right.
He's definitely his own character. In fact, he's every bit, to me anyway, he's every bit as iconic at this point as Boba Fett, at least as far as like the character development.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just think that if you introduce like a Boba Fett thing while you got the Mandalorian going on at the same time, that's what I'm just afraid of.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I know what you're saying. And it's kind of like, now you're just,
because now people don't know the difference.
Yeah. It's like, wait, but the thing is, I don't think that they can introduce a Boba Fett series until they finish out the storyline in The Mandalorian, though.
Sure. I mean, first you got to flesh that out. Yeah.
Boba Fett, right? So they got to flesh that out, I think.
Yeah. Which I feel like they're kind of starting to do a little bit with the whole Bo-Katan popping up, because she started explaining, like, when she found out, oh wait, you took your helmets off. She was like, oh, you're one of them. Like, okay, we got some explaining to do. And this, then they kind of was sitting down eating squid and octopus or whatever, but they kind of trying to explain to him, like, okay, well, this is what happened. I'm actually from Mandalore, but blah 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 blah, and your group is more like this.
It's so funny. It's like, okay, so here's what happened. It's exactly. And that's basically what it is. And this is why they have to be really careful. And now you were saying that you think that the George Lucas sequel trilogy could still be made because it technically takes place before The Force Awakens. Was that the whole thing?
Yeah, because, as we've said before, so if we talk, there's 30 years between End of Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So in that time period, you could have this going on, and you could have and you can still wrap into a lot of stuff because, okay, Because remember, we often talked about like, oh, we wanted to see the fall of Kylo Ren or what happened. Well, you can still show that because Luke is supposed to be establishing the Jedi Order. Leia's off trying to start this whole new republic. Han gets, he's kind of like, well, I'm just go back to doing what I'm used to doing, that's smuggling. So you can show that whole passage of time with these new characters that we already have accepted already. We've already accepted Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. We've already accepted Donald Glover as Lando. Mark Hamill has given his blessing on Sebastian Stan as being his stand-in. You find you a new Leia, and then there you go. We already got Donald Driver, so he may come in like towards the end or whatever to kind of show the fall of Kylo, if you will. So you could really show that whole trilogy, so to speak, if you wanted to, and it's still not interfere with what happened in Rise of Skywalker.
Well, see, what I think they would have
to I'm sorry, Force Awakens and all the way to Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, what they would have to do is they would have to sandwich it sometime after whenever the Mandalorian's gonna like end. Like the series.
Right.
So let's say they do 5 seasons. So it's somewhere between 6 and 11 years after Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. So say the sequel trilogy of Lucas's then starts at 15 years after and goes to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to take a page out of Eric's playbook and say,
he cheats.
Hey, this is technically, so Daryl makes a good point. Yeah, technically you could tell that story, but I think the question is, should you?
Oh,
because
that is Eric.
Should you tell that story now? Because we've got basically with the sequel trilogy, you've got future history that's now written. So now you're going to have to make sure that you're super careful with how you treat the characters and not mess anything up that's going to contradict something that happens within within Rise of Skywalker, on back. So, you've got that timeline that you can't really mess up now. So should you tell that story? Like I said, I would like to see some of those things as well, but is that just me being a fanboy?
I think I would say you should. I would say you should, because I think if you do it the right way, and here's my reasons. One, I think, and this is one of the big main reasons, I think if you do it, or you should do it, because it could heal those wounds that Star Wars fans have had because of the J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson trilogy. I think if you give context to what happens later on with the Rise of Skywalker, and it's not going to heal everything, but I think it can at least bring some type of resolution or closure for those who have those issues. I think you could, without retconning anything, I think you can just, if you can do some expository visuals on that type of stuff, I think fans would kind of like get into it. And then on top of that, you also give the fans what they actually wanted from these characters. You can actually show, like I said, Luke igniting the green. You can show Han, doing Han's thing, and you can kind of give the fans kind of what they want, so they can kind of put their trust back into Star Wars again. And I think if you do that, you could do that with that particular thing. And then now when you launch off with something completely fresh and brand new, like we're thinking for the High Republic, at least you have brought a lot of those fans back.
But why can't the High Republic thing be what you're seeking? Why does it have to be the original trilogy characters, doing their thing? Why can't it be the High Republic era and all of the things that are surrounding that, the trilogy, the books, the comics, whatever? Mm-hmm. Why can't that be the healing force? So
all right, Ray. Well, because I think the damage was done. Because the damage was done to the original trilogy characters. It's in a sense like you've kind of hurt the original trilogy in a way. Yeah,
the problem, I get what you're saying, and I actually I mean, there's a part of me that agrees with it, but the problem is it's nullified if you're getting different actors to play those original trilogy characters. It's never going to satisfy the core audience because they're not seeing Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher.
True, but I mean,
the characters, I guess, but
yeah, but I think, and I mean, that's true. You mean, like I said, and that's why I say it's not going to completely kill everything, but I think what it would do is kind of like smooth things over to the point where it's bearable. That's what I'm saying, like where people can actually
the opposite effect.
I mean, yeah, there's always that, but I mean, I think that if you do it the correct way, and especially if you have someone like, especially it's George Lucas, once again, we always keep saying, all this whole world is created by one man. So it's just like if he's the guy that's going to say, then you almost kind of have to believe it anyway because it's him.
Well, if he oversees it, like he gets another director, but I mean, if he oversees
right, exactly.
It could. But then again, to Dave's point, though, they have to be really careful because, the prequel trilogy had a lot that it had to do because it had to come up neatly to the original trilogy. But this one's got the past and the future to kind of sit neatly in between. And that's going to be tough because you can't, it's not just, and you have to look at it like this. It's not just messing up the continuity and canon of the films. You got the books and the comics and all this stuff that are official canon now that are all over the place as far as where it takes. Now, you could counter that by saying, yeah, but there's not really a whole lot in that time period. And that is true. So, I mean, from that standpoint, you would be correct in saying that, where it's like, well, yeah, but nobody's touched, like, say, between 15 and, 20 years or something.
Right.
Like 15 years after. And I mean, that would be true. And I guess it really depends, too, on, is the Mandalorian really taking place, like, year by year? So is it really, like, 6 to 11 years, or are there time jumps between seasons? I mean, we just don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
Even like you said too, we don't even know the cameo. I mean, they could actually have like a Luke or a Leia or a Lando or somebody pop up, and it's like, okay, well, now we gotta make sure that's good now.
Yeah, I think you still can do it though. I think it still will work. I think it's one of those things that would help satisfy some fans. And I just really think that, it's one of those things that we're always kind of, we as Star Wars fans are always looking for, like, okay, we want to see more of this. And I think there's a greater story to tell with the characters that we already know, like, because let's just say even Carrie Fisher was still alive. And so you still got Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford and, Carrie Fisher. Okay. You still could, I mean, you have to de-age them. So you will still have to kind of go through that process. So you might as well just go with new people anyway.
They'd have to at this point. I mean, in order to
that's what I'm saying. Like, you might as well just go with new people who we've already accepted. I mean, we already accepted Ewan McGregor as a young Obi-Wan Kenobi. They didn't worry about, it's not Alec Guinness. Like, okay, it's taking place this point in time. Okay, yeah, we have to suspend that.
Well, but that's because a young Alec Guinness never played Obi-Wan, though. See, the problem is you had a 30-year-old Harrison Ford playing Han Solo. And so the problem is if you go now and you try to do stuff that takes place after Return of the Jedi, and you're getting another guy in there, like Kurt Russell or something. Well, he's a little too old, but I mean, somebody, that kind of looks similar. Right? I mean, that's the problem. It would almost be like if Alec Guinness had actually played Obi-Wan, when he was like 20, and then he plays him when he's 60, but then you get Ewan McGregor to play him. That's how you would have to compare that. But I mean, they did accept Alden Ehrenreich, maybe.
I would say maybe on that one.
Maybe, because you don't know if that actually, there were so many variables that played into the box office failure. But I will say that most fans do have warm feelings toward that movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think everybody pretty much praised him. Like, they said, okay, it felt like he didn't. Of course, Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford, but
I still think they could have gotten somebody a little closer to the way that Harrison looks and acts. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ehrenreich did a good job. It was Donald Glover that actually knocked it out of the park. I mean, he was the young Lando.
I agree with that.
But Alden was okay. I could accept it, but he didn't feel like Han Solo to me. Now, that depends on too whether or not he was playing it that way on purpose, because the idea was Solo was supposed to be Han Solo becoming that character, very much the way the new James Bond movies. I was just having this conversation the other day with somebody. They didn't realize that the Daniel Craig movies were actually a prequel.
Right.
Like all of them. And it was actually the end of, what was the last? Well, not Spectre. Spectre was kind of like the first one, but it was the end of Skyfall that kind of like bumps up to that classic James Bond. So Spectre was kind of like the first movie that more or less deals with him in a slightly more classic sense. But a lot of people didn't get that. So if
I mean,
the Ehrenreich thing was kind of the same deal, that it's like, okay, he's becoming, and then if he had the chance to play the character again, maybe he would be more like Harrison Ford. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I think he probably could do it, especially getting coached by Harrison. If Harrison decided to coach him, I'm like, oh yeah, you just kind of.
Yeah, he gave him some pointers too. I mean, Dave, what did you actually think of Solo? And more importantly, do you want to see more of Solo? And if you do, it's like a 3-part question. There's a teacher and you should love this. And if you do you want it in another movie or a TV series?
Well, it took me a while to accept Alden as Han Solo. It took me a while.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I liked the movie overall, but it just, like, to Eric's point, like, he didn't really feel like Han Solo to me. But after a few viewings of the film, I started to accept it, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get into this. Let's see, second part of the question, do I want to see another Solo movie? I don't know what other story they could tell at this point in time to be worthy of a film. So I guess to the third part of the question, I would rather I could get behind like a mini series or streaming series like The Mandalorian. I could get behind that for a little bit for a Solo series. They have to have Donald Glover back as Lando, though. They have to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that honestly, where they could go with a series, and this is why I feel you would need a series to tell this story. They need to show how Han got involved with the Hutts, became, like known as one of the most famous smugglers in the galaxy kind of thing. They can go there and show you, because when you really think about when we meet him in A New Hope, I mean, Han Solo is infamous. Like, everybody knows him, and he's really, really tight with Jabba, to the point where, Daryl, you pointed out a million times, he almost has that fatherly connection to him in a way. It's kind of like he adopts him as one of his own, and everybody's aware of him. And then, it's really weird, but if you think about it, Han Solo is the original John Wick, because the Hutts and that whole, like smuggler gangster kind of thing is sort of like the community, but then Jabba decides to put a price on his head, and now everybody's after him. And it kind of mirrors that. Obviously not the same action, but
I was about to say Han Solo's not blasting that people, right?
I mean, he's like,
I guess if you kill Chewie, he might, but
yeah,
I mean, that's the closest to the dog. I mean,
exactly. It's like he killed his Wookiee, and now he's going to go out and
exactly.
That was hilarious. But it's kind of like that same correlation, and you could tell the story about how he got into that, because when you think about where we leave him, Beckett was the one that was sort of like his mentor, and then of course he betrays him, and it teaches him a valuable lesson. And I mean, that goes into why Han is the way he is. But you can really get into some stuff
Yeah, even Kira, like even his relationship with
Well, and then the whole Crimson Dawn. Now you're actually, in fact, what you could do. Here's what they should do.
Here we go.
But yeah, it's like they need to listen to me.
To Eric, you must listen.
Exactly. See, but here's what they need to do. They need to actually make this limited series, like maybe an 8-episode series that illustrates this. It sets up Maul as the head of the Crimson Dawn, because we already know this from the end of Solo. And it gets into a little bit of that. And that could be the launching point to the Lucas sequel trilogy. Because that's the crux. You know, it even mentions in several of the articles, that's the approach that Maul is taking. He's a head of Crimson Dawn. He's rising up through the ranks. He trains this new apprentice, Darth Talon, which is also interesting to me because what it would mean, if you remember, Maul actually somewhat renounced the Sith. He didn't consider himself a Sith anymore.
Right.
So now he would have to re-embrace that, train a new apprentice. He's still the head of Crimson Dawn. You know, now you would actually have a neat thing, and it would frame things up, because if you just came out with this thing, people would be like, what? I don't even understand what this is. Where's Rey? You know, where's like Cara Dune? You know, I mean, people would really understand like where this is fitting. But if you came out with the Solo series, and you can even set this up in the upcoming Obi-Wan series, because he's on Tatooine, so you can do a little bit of Jabba stuff there. You know, even though obviously that takes place between 3 and 4, but you're setting some things up. And then if you set it up with this Solo miniseries, then you can kick this off. And I think it would give the context that the audience would need in order to go, oh, okay. I mean, not everybody, because not everybody is subscribing to Disney Plus, but at the same time, I could go to anybody on the street and say Baby Yoda, and they all know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So there's definitely something to these series. And if you did this Solo series, I think that would be a phenomenal launching off point. And then I might actually be a little bit more warm to getting this Lucas trilogy. But again, like Dave says, you really have to be careful, though, because now you're tiptoeing in this minefield of canon.
Exactly. So who would you want Lucas to direct this whole new trilogy, or would you?
Well, I wouldn't want Lucas to direct another Star Wars film ever. I just want him to write it.
Just okay.
Just write it and produce
it. I figured.
Executive produce it. Yeah. You know what? Like what he basically did for Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
that's what he needs to do.
Right.
You know, that would be the best thing. So you get Lucas telling the story. Then he passes it off to an actual screenwriter, and then they hire a real director, and then they. I know it's like I'm being terrible, but
totally taking down the Godfather of this thing.
Well, you know, I mean, I can just see this too. You know, it's kind of like I can imagine, like if he were here, I might not say it quite like that, but because it's not so much. I mean, everybody forgets he did direct A New Hope, you know, and I mean that was cool, but. I don't know. He's not really good at directing actors, and that's the main job of a director. And the performances are kind of terrible, but he's great at storytelling and he's great at writing. And so if you get him to do that, and then once that's in place, now he's, you know, going through and checking off the pictures and, okay, I like that and I like this and I don't, you know, that what he usually does.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's cool, because the other thing where I think that the prequels suffered, besides the wooden performances by the actors, and you know they're basically in this green room, and it's like, okay, now we're gonna play pretend. You know, you have to pretend there's like a bunch of people, and you're like, okay, I'm alone in a green room. You know, where's really my motivation in this? But the other problem is that unlike the original trilogy, because a lot of people forget this, unlike the original trilogy, when you go back to the prequels, everybody was a yes man. Like everybody was kind of like afraid to tell Lucas, you know, in a lot of ways what they thought. And they were basically just so excited. They were happy to be there.
They wanted to keep their jobs.
That too. Even though, you know, there was that, Daryl, I think we covered this on a show once where there was like the difference between Lucasfilm under Disney and Lucasfilm under Lucas. Under Lucas, it was all chill and everybody was cool, laughing, having a good time. And then once,
Kathleen,
yeah,
as we got to call her Killer Kathleen.
Yeah, once it got to that, it just became like a nightmare. And, everybody was like, oh, it was terrible. And, it was a horrible experience and everything. And I mean, it's funny because you could sort of tell. I'm sitting there thinking, well, no kidding. They're firing like every director they hire, they're halfway or 3/4 of the way through the movie or whatever. And then they end up firing them. It's kind of like, well, yeah, things might not be so happy in Lucasfilm land. But I do definitely think, though, that if you go forward with it, especially something that Lucas came up with himself, you need to somewhat give him his old role back. Even if you're not making him like the be-all, end-all of Lucasfilm, you need to give him the reins on this thing.
I agree.
Because I would like to see, look, I mean, after we saw another episode of The Mandalorian recently, which was episode 3 or chapter 12 or whatever, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. You could see that Ron Howard and, basically the Howard family, Star Wars would be in good hands with them, I think. They were another pair of people that I always thought would, like, you know what? If you gave Ron Howard a little bit of the reins to make some of these films, kind of like he could be the new JJ in a sense.
Spielberg.
Well, obviously that would be the best, but I think Ron Howard would really knock it out of the park. I mean, didn't he do Willow? Pretty sure he directed Willow. And Lucas produced it.
That sounds right to me.
Yeah. And because I remember that was one of the big things, is that was the first time that he came in. And I thought it was really hilarious that he ends up working on Solo and then his daughter comes in and starts directing Mandalorian episodes.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of weird to me. But I just think that would be, a really good move on their part, because on one hand, I agree with Dave that you got to be like super careful about if you do make this sequel trilogy, you can't mess it up.
Oh yeah.
You got to cast it right. You got to hire the right director. You've got, you got to like get the story group to really like go through all the canon stuff and make sure that, they know where all the mines are, basically.
I would vote for 2 story groups, by the way. I would vote for one to be on the prequel side and say, here's everything on the prequels that can't be overstepped, and then the sequel side, and just they would have to collaborate, but they need to have like masterminds on each side, and when the story is presented, hey, can't do that, or yep, that sounds good, no conflicts here, that kind of thing, because it's sandwiched in between those 2 time periods, and you just got to be careful.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of those things where definitely, and a lot of times I wonder, because I know there's like 5 or 6 people on the story group, but they're responsible for so much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem is that Kathleen Kennedy is trying to be a little bit too much. She's micromanaging a little too much. She's not acting like a studio head. She's trying to act more like a producer, but she's not as familiar as she needs to be. This is what I like about Filoni and Favreau, is those guys are like canon junkies.
Mm-hmm.
They know all this like little bits of information. That's why you get all these weird Easter eggs.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that, but I don't know. I think ultimately, I mean, in wrapping this thing up, if you guys had to let's do over under, let's go 30%. So over under 30%. Chances of this movie being, or the sequel trilogy being made. Dave, what do you think?
Under.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with under. I mean, if I did go like over, it'd be like 32%. I don't see them doing this, because I think that they have too much that's planned already. But it does make you wonder, though, because they've got movies that are being released, I think, in like 2023 and 25 and 27. To my knowledge, do we know what those are yet?
Nope.
I thought there was some sort of a rumor that addressed it because, wasn't it the Taika Waititi thing?
Well, Taika Waititi, he's the first one up.
Yeah, but I mean, is it like a one and done, or is he making a trilogy, or do we not?
I know Rian Johnson has a trilogy that's allegedly still going. I think Taika may be a one and done, but then you also have, that might be a series. But as far as the films go, Kevin Feige.
Yeah, I know he was supposed to do something. Well, here's a question for you guys. Dave, we could start with you. What do you think that they should do standalone films for a while, or do you think that they should do another trilogy?
That's a good question. That's why you asked it, right?
Pretty much.
So the last trilogy is kind of what, as Daryl was saying, did damage to some of the fan base, right? And just because of their treatment of it. So I wouldn't be upset if they did standalones for a while. I wouldn't be upset by that. I would understand that that's kind of the a way that they're seeing to win some fans back.
So it sounds like you're saying like you'd prefer a trilogy, but you would understand if you would be okay with them doing standalones.
I mean, come on, that's what we've gotten cinematically. For the bulk of the films are all in trilogies. That's kind of where, I mean,
Star Wars lives.
Yeah, exactly. Even with the old expanded universe novels, a lot of them were in trilogies as well. So
true.
There's that whole there's a trilogy theme going on. Personally, yeah, I would like a trilogy. But I think that from a business standpoint, I think they need to do standalones.
All right, Daryl.
I'm going to go with, for now, I would say standalones, no trilogies until you actually have something really complex that's
like a story that warrants one or something.
There you go. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like, the only thing I can honestly see, like, if these High Republic books are as good as we think they're going to be, that would warrant a trilogy.
Yeah,
and it should be based upon that. But I mean, if it's not that, I'd rather just give me a regular standalone film, because, like I said, Rogue One, awesome. Solo, great. Right. Yep. You know, those did fine. But you know, if you don't have it, much like we've always said with the story, if you don't have a story that drives it, don't do it.
Yeah, my feeling is piggybacking off of yours, actually, because I say they should do standalones until they hit a story that people really like and want to see more of, and then focus on the trilogy there. Because that would be a way that you can somewhat fix things, right? Because what's happening is Disney is guessing what the Star Wars fans want, and they're wrong half the time. And a lot of what you could do is you can make like these standalone movies and go, what do you guys think of this? And what do you guys think of that? And you know, if it fails, it's just one movie. You don't have to worry about people pretty much bashing what's going to come after it, right? But if you release a movie and it resonates with people, well, then you can go on. I mean, honestly, I think that's why we're getting a Cassian Andor series. Because, like I said,
let me bring one of your arguments back to you then. So they make
I don't like where this is going.
Now he's going to pick out my playbook.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they make with your own gun.
Yeah, right. So they make a standalone, right? And people love it. And then, so the other two films in the trilogy don't necessarily have a plan, which is what you've been preaching that, you know, the entire time. They have to have a plan. So how are they going to, you know, plan out the movies 2 and 3 of the trilogy when they didn't really have a plan as to beyond that standalone?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, because I mean, even if you look at the first 6 films that Lucas did. I mean, granted, he didn't flesh everything out, but he definitely had an outline. He had an outline originally, like I think 12 or something. So there is definitely that argument, but at the same time, you know, it's no different than, okay, who's everybody's favorite character from the prequel trilogy? Obi-Wan. Guess what? Obi-Wan gets a series now. You know, it's like you can, because the Star Wars universe is so vast and there's so much story to tell, it would be rare, I think, that you would have a story that was so closed that you couldn't continue the adventure. I mean, we just even talked about Solo. It's like, well, now you can argue what would be better, a film or a series, but you could actually do it. Now, what you don't want to do and what you want to avoid, and I think this is what's going to go into your point a little bit, is like if they do a standalone film and everybody loves it, if they decide to rush another movie into production.
Exactly.
You know, like, yeah, oh, they love this movie. Let's hurry up and, you know, by next year we're going to have a film out. Yeah, that would be disastrous. And, you know, I mean, heaven forbid you actually try to do it, make it into a trilogy. So now you have 2 terrible films. I mean, that could just destroy everything. But if you look and you see like, hey, you know, people are either into this, maybe this era or this group of people or this one character, you can spin off of it. You know, I mean, it's no different than, and they have to be careful about how they're doing this, obviously, but they bring Boba Fett back, and guess what? He's getting a little mini series. Why? I don't know, but maybe they were like, I don't really know. The thing that's funny about the Boba Fett thing is do we even know, is it a prequel to The Mandalorian? Is it going to be like parallel to it?
We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. We have no idea. But yet they were basically saying like, oh yeah, it's going to be shot, you know, as early as like this week or something. So they do have to be somewhat careful about what they do. But the nice thing about Star Wars is because the world is so vast and because there's so many different characters. I mean, you know, you look at that one Clone Wars episode in season 7. Well, actually, it was an entire story arc where Ahsoka was in the, what was that, like the lower levels or whatever of Coruscant.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look at all the rich characters you have. You know, you can, that actually almost could spin off into Lucas's original, what was that thing called? Star Wars like 1313 or something.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be the whole underworld thing. And there's actually like YouTube, like they were doing some rough cuts or, you know, like test footage or something like that. And I mean, it looked amazing. So you could do it, but again, it comes back to the same point that you can't just go, oh, look, everybody loves this movie or this character or whatever. Let's rush a sequel into production.
Right. And, you know, with fans, though, they would be expecting, if it's part of a trilogy, they'd be expecting the next entry into that trilogy to happen within 2 years, maybe 3 years. And by the time you get a film out there where, yeah, everybody loved it, you know what? The writers have moved on. People are doing other things. Their head is not in the same story. So I think doing it that way might be a little tedious to try to do. Now, what they could do is do some extra work for each standalone film that they do, and have a rough idea, a rough outline of number 2, number 3 in a trilogy. If this were to become a trilogy, where's our outline? Let's have that first before we even put out the standalone. That way we can gauge whether, you know, is this going to be successful or not. I think that would be a better way to go rather than just trying to say, you know, how did this one do? Okay, let's make a trilogy on that storyline and then take it up from there, because then you're going to have a lot of time in between the releases of them to be as effective as a trilogy could be.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're gonna end up doing the whole Anakin in the Starfighter thing. Like, all right, let's do this. That's a good trick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and basically that's the thing.
That's pretty much what it turns into.
Well, and with Solo, they did do that because remember, they were going to do a trilogy. And then when they found out that it's like, oh, it's not doing so well. Yeah, let's not do that now. And in fact, let's not even do standalone films for a while. I think maybe they overreacted a little bit, but they definitely had some outlines of where they could go before they even released the first one. So that definitely goes into that. And, I think that they do that even with the books a lot of times too. And they know what they're going to do. I mean, there was that book, The Last Shot, that, granted, it took me, forever to read that thing, but not because it wasn't good. It just didn't have as much time as I wanted. But it was great because it actually took place during the Solo era, and then during parts of the original trilogy, and then after Return of the Jedi. And it was kind of like going back and forth between time, and it was showing how Lando and Han were having a really hard time adjusting to more or less civilian life. And they were trying to go off on these different adventures and stuff, and then they were remembering back to, it took place, I think, a little bit before the movie Solo, and then a little bit after it, so you get to see a little bit of sequelized stuff there. So, and there's always all these different directions they could do, but I think that what we're all saying, and I think we all agree, they have to have a plan no matter what they're doing. You can't just say, well, hey, that sounds good, let's just do this. I mean, the Anakin thing was like a perfect it was the perfect illustration, because all right, let's do this now. And it makes you wonder, because sometimes you kind of think that might be what they're doing in these board meetings. It's just like, well, I don't know, this action figure sold really well last year, let's make a movie about them. And that conversation's happening.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, I think it's really important that they they do that. So do you guys have any final thoughts as far as the sequel trilogy goes? We could do as Han would say, don't everybody thank me at once.
Well, I'm being hospitable and letting our guests go first.
Yeah, so of course we should.
Well, as far as the this sequel trilogy that we've the potential for it that we've been talking about, as much as I would like to see some aspects of it, I don't think it should be done. To be quite honest, I don't think it should be done. Not to say that there aren't some interesting stories that could be told, but I would almost take it from a different character's point of view than the main, original trilogy characters.
I'm going to say that in regards to the sequel trilogy, I would like to see it. I think if you just do it correctly, much like anything, whether it was this or any brand new Star Wars, you just got to do it right. I think that's just the main thing. I think they just have to really, much like Master Yoda would say, focus on, what's in front of you. And, if you want to do it, okay, put Lucas in it, let him kind of spearhead it, but find different directors, maybe even let Filoni direct it. Maybe let this be Filoni's first debut, thing, because he's always wanted to do an actual film. We can see that he's going to do his first live action television. We've seen that, but now let's step him up to do a film, and then once he can kind of do that, then I think it'll be off to the races.
All right. Well, before I give my thoughts, we have Facebook user that's saying hi to me. So hi, Facebook user. Just so you guys know, if you're commenting on this is kind of like a StreamYard thing. We're testing this platform too. It's another reason why we're actually doing the show. You have to actually give permission for your whole name and avatar and all that to be used by StreamYard. So it's like a little extra step. But hey, I mean, it's good to know that people are watching and are willing to type in and chat. I kept forgetting to actually say this. I don't know why, because I always do this. Like on the YouTube thing, I'm reminding everybody every 5 minutes. But, you can actually chat on this thing and we can respond to you. So that part's cool. I mean, obviously, if you're watching the rebroadcast, hey, leave it in the comment section and we'll answer it there. But as far as my thoughts on this, I'm going to actually go somewhere a little bit different. I probably should have brought this up earlier, but honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing this or the Duel of the Fates episode 9, but I'd like to see it animated. Do full-length animated feature movies. And then you could even get the original actors, minus Carrie Fisher, of course, to do the voices if you wanted. Or you can have other people do it. But I think that would be a way where you can do it in a safer way. So in a way, yes, you could actually have it to where, like Daryl says, hey, I want to see this. There's a lot of stories you could tell. This would be kind of cool. I think it would be a worthy addition to canon. But then going to Dave's point, it's sort of like the movies tend to be sacred. You know, they have this thing to where people are a little bit more patient and tolerant, I think, of the animated stuff than they are the actual films. But it might be a little dangerous to see this made into a movie because people are really sensitive right now. I mean, it could jack up canon to the point to where people just give up on Star Wars, which I never thought was actually a possibility before now. But, you know, the way that people are acting these days, it's kind of like they could almost just say, you know what, forget this. I mean, The Mandalorian's done a lot to bring us back. But
I agree with that. I was just thinking that too. I mean, The Mandalorian is one of those things where a lot of people, whether it's the hardcore fans to, you know, the casual fans, they're responding to it. And there's something to be said for that. So I think a lot of credit has to go to Favreau and Filoni for doing that. But, you know, going back to my whole point, if you do this kind of trilogy, you've got to be careful. You've got to do it right. It's got to be done to perfection. And I don't know who would be able to do that outside of Favreau and Filoni, to be quite honest.
Well, that's a good point, actually, because you could get Lucas to, you know, write the story, kind of executive produce, but then get Favreau and Filoni in there to, you know, either one or both of them to either go in and direct or to, you know, write and direct. I mean, whatever, you know, right. You could actually have that happen, because I really think that in the Star Wars world now, Lucasfilm really needs to look at those guys as this is like passing the torch. You need to let these guys carry the mantle, so to speak, of Star Wars, because they're really doing it right.
I agree. So let me ask you a question then. If you wanted to see this as animation, what style of animation would be best for this type of venture?
Oh, like Resistance. No.
Yeah, Daryl, eye roll.
No, I'm head out.
That's a hard pass for me then.
Like,
sorry.
You know, Dave and I are now the only ones on the broadcast. It's like, oh, we seem to have willfully lost Daryl, you know. But yeah, it would almost have to be that whole like 3D animation, you know, almost cinematic, like basically like season 7 of the Clone Wars.
Okay.
It would have to be like that, because you would have to maintain that cinematic movie-like quality. Whereas, you know, if you did it in another style of animation, I mean, I guess you could, but it would be, I think it might then do it a disservice, because you still want it to feel like it is a movie, but you could do more in animation. You can get away with more in animation. And it also, I don't know, it just has like a less reverential, you know, pretty much set in stone kind of thing like the films do. There's just something about the Star Wars movies that, you know, I mean, and when things go wrong in people's minds, it just tweaks them. Whereas, and no, don't get me wrong, I mean, they'll have plenty to say in animation too. I mean, after all, the success of the Clone Wars, people tended to try to get some ownership of that, and when they thought that something was amiss, they let you know. Or even Rebels. Remember the whole space whales thing? You know, people were going on and on about how stupid that was and everything else. So, I mean, there were some definite missteps in both of those series, and that was still animation. But it wasn't like what The Last Jedi or even Rise of Skywalker got.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. It's tough. It really is difficult. I mean, it's one of those things that I think that you it's like you said, they got to be careful no matter what they do from this point on, because they've got the fan base so divided and so just jaded and pretty much what's the word I'm looking for?
Disenfranchised.
Yeah, disenfranchised is a really good one. And just so like hardened, like they're just not. It's not. There's that wow factor's gone. It's kind of like they're just they just have a different attitude about it, and it's like you got to try to bring that back. Now, again, The Mandalorian did bring a lot of that back, actually, which a lot of people didn't think. And it's weird that that's the series that's the thing that you would think would appeal to just a small section of fans, because most people would be like, "That what's a Mandalorian?"
Right.
It's not like they really mention it that much in the films.
Right.
So, and the fact that thing is a runaway, which of course a lot of that has to do with Baby Yoda, let's be honest, but still, I mean, it's kind of a weird, quirky little series when you really step back and think about it. And why is that the one that's uniting everybody? And so it's like at this point, who knows? And that's got to be what's happening in Lucasfilm right now. They're probably kind of like, well, I don't even know what to do anymore. And maybe, and this goes back into Daryl's point a little bit, maybe it is time to hand the reins back to Lucas. Maybe he is the one that needs to fix it while he's still alive and can do it. Right the ship.
Yeah. It might be.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for our little experimental show. So, hey, if you guys are watching a rebroadcast or whatever, you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you guys think. If you actually, I don't even know how long this is going to be on our head-to-head of Star Wars community Facebook group. But if you're actually in the Facebook group, hey, feel free to leave a comment on it and let us know. Is this something you guys want to see? Do you want to see some like member-only type shows or whatever where we do something special? Because, we could do that on any platform. We might even try to eventually do that on YouTube. Of course, a lot of this stuff's going to end up on our YouTube channel eventually. But, this is something that, this is kind of fun. You guys had a good time, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
See, this is like kind of a cool little thing to do. And it was a little different from our usual show. And, it was kind of nice. It was kind of interesting to have a third person.
Yes.
It's like somebody that can mediate. See, we need you there during like Duel of the Fates. Of course,
There you go.
The problem is Daryl and I agree all the time. So maybe we need somebody that has a different point of view.
There you go.
We're agreeing too much. We need somebody to fight with, It's like, but what did you going to say something, Daryl? You sounded like you were going to say something. You had that look like you wanted. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this little experimental show. Like I said, let us know, what you guys are thinking. And we will, Lord willing, see you guys this Friday at 8 p.m. on our Head-to-Head, a Star Wars podcast YouTube page. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And I'm Dave Cossey.
And we will see you soon.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.